For 3 years. He never let me open the door at the end of our house. That was the very first sentence she said the moment she walked into the room. Then she quietly sat down in the chair. She didn't put her bag on the floor. She was still holding it in her lap, as if she were going to get up and leave in a few minutes. Her hands were clasped together, but they weren't shaking. They were simply held much tighter than normal. Her eyes didn't wander around the room. She didn't even look at the rain outside the window. It was as if she wasn't looking at me at all. But at a single moment, she had been trying to escape for years. I waited quietly. One of the first things I learned as a therapist was this. Some people don't know where to begin talking. Others don't know where to stop. The door at the end of our house. She said again. He never let me open it for 3 years. What did he say it was? I asked. The woman slowly shook her head. Nothing. She paused for a moment. He would only say, that door has to stay closed. He never explained why. No. She took a deep breath. At first, I respected that. Because everyone has a past, and not everyone is ready to talk about it. I gave a slight nod. So, when did you start becoming suspicious? For the first time, the woman looked directly at me. There was no anger in her eyes. No accusation either. Only the exhaustion of many years. Not because of the door, but because of the man he became whenever he stood in front of it. Your husband. A bitter smile appeared on her lips. No, my fiancé. A brief silence settled over the room. Whenever he walked down that hallway, he became someone else. In what way? Quieter, more distant, as if he wasn't living in the same house with me anymore. Silence filled the room once again. At first, I thought there was another woman. She paused, took a deep breath. Looking back now, I wish that had really been the truth. This time, I didn't answer. I didn't even open my notebook, because I could feel it. The story I was about to hear today wasn't a story about betrayal. So, I said, what was behind that door? The woman slowly closed her eyes. A long silence followed. Then she said a single word. Time. After she said, there was time behind that door, she remained silent for a long while. I didn't break the silence. Sometimes, after people say the most important sentence of their lives, they need a few seconds to carry its weight. Her name was Olivia. She was 32 years old. She had met her fiancé, Ethan, for years earlier in a bookstore. It wasn't a romantic story, she said with a faint smile. We both reached for the same book. And then, he let me have it. We had coffee after that. What was Ethan like? Olivia answered without hesitation. Calm. You felt safe around him. She paused for a moment. For the first time in my life, someone wasn't trying to change me. What do you mean? He never told me how to dress. He never interfered with my friends. He never interfered with my work. He simply stood beside me. I gave a slight nod. Sometimes people realize far too late how valuable that really is. Olivia smiled. Yes, Ethan was a very good man. Was he? I still think he is. That sentence caught my attention. Because in a therapist's office, people usually speak about the past in the past tense. But Olivia still said, he is a good man. What about the door? Her smile slowly faded. It had been there from the very beginning. At the end of the hallway, a white door. It looked no different from the others. But Ethan, whenever he walked past it, his footsteps slowed down. Sometimes he stopped. Sometimes he simply stared at the doorknob for a few seconds. Then he walked away without saying a word. Did you ever ask him about it? Not during the first few months. Why not? Because everyone has doors. They aren't ready to open. She fell silent for a moment. Then one day, Ethan yelled at me for the first time. I raised my eyebrows. What happened? I was cleaning the hallway. I accidentally touched the doorknob. When Ethan saw me, Olivia took a deep breath. He frightened me for the first time in my life. Silence. That day, I realized there wasn't just a room behind that door. Why was Ethan so angry that day? I asked. Olivia remained silent for a long time. He just said he didn't want me touching that door. Didn't he give you any other explanation? No. He said, please don't ever go near that door again. And then he apologized. I gave a slight nod. Did that reassure you? At first, yes. Because when you love someone, you want to believe they just had a bad day. She paused for a moment. But then I started noticing little things. What kind of things? Ethan would sometimes wake up in the middle of the night. I'd realize he wasn't beside me. Where would he go? The hallway. In front of that door. Silence. Did he ever open it? No. He would simply stand there. For how long? Sometimes 2 minutes. Sometimes 10. Sometimes even longer. Did you ever ask him about it? One night I did. I asked, "Are you okay?" Olivia lowered her eyes. He just nodded. "Let's go back to bed," he said. He didn't say another word. That was the first night. I felt something I couldn't explain. Because people can sense a secret. Even if they can't give it a name, they can still feel its presence. As the weeks passed, the silence in that hallway grew heavier. Every time Ethan walked past that door, his pace slowed, and I kept pretending not to notice. I felt guilty. Why? Because I wanted to trust him. I didn't want to become the person who was always suspicious. She took a deep breath. But then, his phone rang. Who was calling? I don't know. He didn't even look at the screen. He picked up the phone, silenced it, and walked straight to the door at the end of the hallway. I raised my eyebrows slightly. Did he open it? No. But Olivia's voice dropped to almost a whisper. But he spoke as if someone was standing on the other side of the door. The silence in the room grew even heavier. What did he say? Olivia closed her eyes. Just one sentence. I couldn't do it today either. She paused. That was the day that I became almost certain there was another woman. When did you open the door? I asked. Olivia took a deep breath. The day Ethan left town. He had a business meeting. He wasn't supposed to be back for 2 days. She lowered her head slightly. I was alone in the house that morning. I kept telling myself the same thing. I'm not going to open that door. And for the entire day, I really didn't. I cleaned the house, did the laundry, spent some time in the kitchen, tried to read a book. But sometimes, the more you try to avoid something you're curious about, the bigger it becomes. That afternoon, I walked into the hallway. I stopped in front of the door. It was the first time I'd looked at it that closely. The white paint had begun to fade. There were tiny scratches on the doorknob, as if the same hand had reached for that exact spot for years. I knew where Ethan kept the house keys. The spare key was with them. Do you think he knew that key belonged to that door? I don't know. Maybe he had forgotten. Or maybe he knew that one day I would do this. Silence. I picked up the key, slid it into the lock. My heart was beating so fast. I turned the key the wrong way twice. Then, the lock clicked open. I slowly pushed the door. It didn't creak. It was as if it had been waiting for someone to come for years. What was inside? Olivia's eyes filled with tears. The first thing I saw, that was a small blue shoe. Silence. Then I saw the bed, the walls, the toys, the children's books lined up on the shelves, the little wooden chair by the window. Everything was perfectly clean. There wasn't even a layer of dust, as if someone had been cleaning that room every single week. I took another step inside. I looked at the drawings hanging on the wall, colorful suns, stick figures, a house, and a family of 3. Then, I noticed a small framed photograph sitting on the nightstand. I picked it up. Ethan was in the picture. Beside him was a woman I had never seen before. And between them, a little boy around 6 years old. There was only one date written beneath the photograph. April 18th. At that moment, I had no idea why that date mattered. But, for the very first time, the entire story I had built in my mind about the other woman began to crack. While I was still holding the photograph, I heard footsteps. At first, I couldn't make sense of it. Ethan wasn't supposed to be back until the next day. My heart began racing again. I didn't even have time to put the photograph back. I heard a key turning in the front door. Then the door opened. "Ethan," I whispered. The moment he saw me standing inside that room, he froze. The color drained from his face. He didn't yell. He didn't ask a single question. His eyes simply moved slowly around the room. The bed, the toys, the framed photograph, and me. "Olivia," he said. There was no anger in his voice, only exhaustion. I began, but I couldn't finish, because for the first time, the thought crossed my mind that maybe I'd been angry at the wrong person. Ethan slowly leaned against the doorway, as if he no longer had the strength to remain standing. "The meeting was canceled," he said, "so I came home early." A long silence filled the room. I held a photograph out to him. "Who is this little boy?" I asked. Ethan didn't answer. He only looked at the photograph. Then he closed his eyes. It was the first time I had ever seen him cry. Silently, without making a sound. His shoulders trembled ever so slightly. I had seen him sad before, but I had never seen him broken. After a few seconds that felt like minutes, he spoke very slowly. "My son." Silence. His name was Noah. The moment those words left his mouth, everything in that room changed. Every detail that had made me think there was a secret affair began to lose its meaning. I whispered, "Where is he?" Ethan didn't answer. He sat down on the edge of the bed. With one hand, he gently straightened the little pillow, as if someone would be coming back to lie there at any moment. Then he opened the drawer of the nightstand. He took out a small red toy car. He slowly turned it between his fingers. Noah wanted this beside him every night. He said, without taking his eyes off the toy car, he continued. Before going to sleep, he would hide it under the bed, and I would pretend to find it. For the first time, his voice trembled. We played the same game every single night. The silence in the room grew heavier. I couldn't say a word, because the thing I wanted to know now wasn't whether there had been another woman. There was only one question left. What that happened to Noah? What that happened to him? I asked. Ethan didn't take his eyes off the photograph. He stayed silent for a long time, as if he were trying to say out loud a story he had never told anyone in years. 2 months before Noah was born, Emily lost her mother. Silence. Nothing was ever the same after that. She was no longer a woman excited about becoming a mother. The house was always quiet. Sometimes she would sit on the same couch for hours. And sometimes she would tell me she didn't want this baby. I raised my eyebrows slightly. Did you see a doctor? Yes. A psychiatrist. A psychologist. Medication. We tried everything. The doctor said she might get better after the birth. And I held on to that hope. He took a deep breath. But after Noah was born, Emily drifted even farther away. Sometimes she wouldn't even look at our son for hours. Sometimes she didn't even want to hold him. One day, I came home early from work. The house was completely silent. I found Emily in the bathroom. Noah was lying in the bathtub. The water was ice cold. And Emily thought she was giving him a bath. She looked at me. Then, in the calmest voice, she asked, "Is he cold?" That was the moment. I knew the woman standing in front of me was still my wife. But she was no longer the same person. From that day on, I never left Noah alone with her again. I stopped going to work. My father came to help. My sister came too. There was always someone in the house. Because I never believed Emily was a bad person. But I knew she was sick. A few weeks later, one morning, Emily collapsed while trying to breastfeed Noah. She was rushed to the hospital. The doctors diagnosed her with postpartum psychosis. She remained in treatment for months. Sometimes she recognized me. Sometimes she didn't. Sometimes she asked where Noah was. And sometimes she insisted she had never had a child at all. Ethan closed his eyes. Noah, that developed a severe infection during that time. He was admitted to the hospital. The doctors did everything they could, but that they couldn't save him. Silence. When Emily found out that a part of her never came back, he looked around the room. Then he spoke very slowly. People think I've kept this room exactly as it was. That because of Noah. He slowly shook his head. No, this room is the last place where Emily was still a mother. When Ethan finished speaking, a long silence filled the room. Neither of us could speak. Not Olivia. Not me. That door at the end of the hallway looked completely different to me now. I had spent all that time searching for secret behind it. Ethan had been protecting a grave. We looked at each other for a long time. Finally, Olivia broke the silence. What? She asked. Why didn't you ever tell me? Ethan lowered his head. His fingers were still resting on Noah's little toy car. Because that I didn't want to trap you inside that room too. Olivia didn't say a word. Ethan continued, and for the first time, his voice completely broke. Because I wasn't strong enough. Silence. I couldn't protect my son. I couldn't protect my wife. Every single day, I believed I could save both of them. But I couldn't save either of them. He took a deep breath. When you came into my life, that I was a man trying to learn how to live again. I laughed. I went to work. I made plans for a future with you. But behind that door, the man who had failed them was still waiting. He looked at me. I didn't want you that to see me like that. I didn't want that the first truth you learn about me that to be the worst chapter of my life. Tears rolled down Olivia's face. But this time, they weren't tears of anger. She slowly shook her head. I never needed you to be perfect. She said, I just that needed you to let me in. The moment those words left her lips, Ethan began to cry. For the first time, he cried as though the weight he had carried for years had finally fallen from his shoulders. That day, I didn't say a single word, because sometimes what a person needs isn't an answer. Sometimes they simply need someone who is willing to cry beside them in silence. Claire, no, Olivia. She smiled faintly for the first time as she said that. Our relationship didn't survive, she said, but not because I left him, because we both realized that we had to heal ourselves first. So, I asked, is that door open now? Olivia thought for a few seconds. Then she smiled very gently. Yes, it's not empty, but it's no longer locked. Silence. You can't keep your past locked away forever. One day, that either you choose to open that door, or that door keeps you trapped inside. She stood up, swung her bay over her shoulder, and walked toward the door. Just before leaving, she stopped. Without turning around, she spoke. James. Yes, I truly believe there was another woman behind that door. Now I know. There wasn't another woman. There was another life. She opened the door, and this time, she walked away without looking back. Silence returned to the room. I opened my notebook. At the bottom of today's file, I wrote a single sentence. Some people don't hide their past because they're ashamed of it. They hide it because they're afraid that telling it will make the people they love watch them fall apart all over again. I held my pen in my hand for a few seconds. Then I added one final note beneath it. The thing that destroys a relationship isn't always the lies that are told. Sometimes, it's the pain that is never shared. I closed the file and waited for my next patient. James.